take it. You have to take it before you go to the dentist. You have to take it
I
now.
gotta take it first.
You have to take it first.
Remind me tomorrow during the break.
Okay. That's what I plan on doing it too.
Oh, I didn't bring my hand.
All right, guys, it's 6:30. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. If you could all please rise and join me in the pledge. All right, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. I've asked Superintendent Balke to give us a brief summary of the audit findings as we find them coming up tonight.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Thanks to everyone for being here. On the table over to my right, we have a number of handouts. If you didn't get handouts, I'd encourage you to get them. And any viewers at home, we have 4 handouts, and they've all been posted on the SAU website. So any interested citizens can follow along with the conversation tonight. I would just like to notify the public and remind the board that this meeting has been appropriately posted. We did put a notice in the Union Leader to make sure people were aware as well. And all of our other postings have been taken care of. GTV is streaming this on channel 16, I believe, as well as on YouTube Live and Facebook. So there's a lot of opportunities for people to have access to the content of this meeting this evening. So I'd like to thank GTV for continuing to share and disseminate information. The purpose of this meeting this evening is for the board to consider options about what to do with the $9.1 million surplus. I'm not going to get into the causes of the surplus at this point. I think we've detailed that over certainly our last meeting and the 2 press releases. Certainly identify the causes of the money and identify how this has occurred. I'd like to say that in seeing some of the activity online and hearing from some people, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge that people are upset, and we fully understand that, and we fully appreciate that. I want the community to know that I'm upset too. The school board is upset. We're upset that we've had incorrect reporting to the state for a considerable amount of time, at least 10 years. I'm upset that we've had inaccurate information as we've developed planning, thinking about our strategic goals, thinking about the initiatives of the district. I'm upset that we're talking about how to return surplus money in an environment where we have been pinching pennies in this school district and making sure that we had enough for our kids. Our per pupil costs are among the lowest in the state. That hasn't changed, and we could have done better for our kids. So I'm upset. I feel badly for the community that we could have and should have done better. I'm upset that we had accounting irregularities and reporting mistakes that were made out of our business office. I'm upset that we weren't informed and directly told by our auditor that these mistakes had occurred. The school district cannot retain more than 2.5% of our total approved appropriation. And the fact that this money was kept in the bank was absolutely unacceptable to me. And I want people to know that we also are upset about this. It's too bad that when you're number 7 on the U.S. News and World Report list of top 10 best high schools in the state, that this is what we're talking about. It's upsetting to me that over the last 5 years, we've worked very hard to transform the school culture at Mountain View Middle School, and this is the conversation we're having. So I do want everyone to know that we acknowledge and appreciate how significant this is. I'm grateful that at this point, we're figuring this out. The point of this evening is for the board to hear a number of options. There will be 2 opportunities for public comment this evening. The handout that you were given, the one that's dated January 3rd, is the one that I would encourage you to look at. That's the one that will have the information that the board will be reviewing, and this will give us the opportunity to have a spirited conversation about how to move forward and how to take care of this situation. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the Board of Selectmen for being here. I'd like to thank Mike Smith from the Budget Committee for being here, members of the community, members of the public, and I just want everyone to know that I will do my best to work hard to restore all of your trust, and that we will continue to do the best we can for our kids in Goffstown and New Boston.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I am going to go ahead and open the floor to public comment. For those of you who are new to public comment, if you turn over your agenda, you'll see our public comment policy on the back. As brief summary, when we ask you to come to the table for public comment, we do ask that you just share your name and your address for the record. You'll be given 3 minutes. We do ask that we keep it respectful. And also, this isn't a time for question and answer. This is a time for you to let us know what you're thinking, but this is not a time for an exchange. We will take it, we'll take notes for your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them as appropriate. Okay? Do I have public comment this evening? Okay, come on up to the table. You can just sit right there. Can you see where the microphone is? And just state your name
Good
and your
evening,
address for
my
the
name's
record.
Kathy Zorowitz, and I'm a resident and tax-paying citizen of Goffstown. I live on Merrill Road, and I have been watching my school tax portion of my property tax bill increase over the years. And I haven't really attended any meetings or said anything about it. I just take the attitude of sit back and let the majority rule. But in this instance, all I have to say is that I am infuriated, my husband's infuriated. Our tax bill has got to the point where we can barely afford to live here anymore. And I'm here for you to tell me what you're gonna do about this surplus and if we're gonna get our money back. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I'll try to be a little louder so you can hear me. My name is Barb Larkin, and my kids are no longer in the school system, but my grandchildren will be. And what dismays me is that you're asking us to make public comment when it would have been much better for us if we heard what you're planning on doing so that we could comment to it. And I see this paperwork and I hear the things that you think about. I guess all I would say to you as a taxpayer is that money was set to be returned to the taxpayers to adjust our taxes. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where I want to see the money go back to. So that's it. I'm sorry we can't talk back and forth, but that's my feeling. I would like that money to go back to where it rightfully belongs, not paying bills and putting money in slush funds or whatever else, you speak of planning on doing. So thank you for hearing me.
Thank you. Do I have any other public comment this evening?
Hello, my name is Lisa DuBois. I live at 88 Maple Avenue with my family. While I completely understand people's frustration and outrage, my opinion is a little bit different. I have 4 kids, 2 of whom have graduated from this school, one in Mountain View, one at another one that's here right now. And we've lived in Goffstown for 15 years, and over the 15 years, I have seen things come before voters many times for improvements at our schools or athletic facilities, all of which have not been approved. And I know it's because people don't want their taxes to go up. Nobody does. But I feel like with this money now, I wish we had gotten it back. We didn't. I don't think it was on purpose. I know it was inadvertent, but the money's there now, and I think it would be better used collectively to do some of these things that we have wanted to do and haven't been able to pass, such as improvements to our schools, a football field that has turf and lights for our field hockey team, our soccer team, our football team, our lacrosse teams. I feel like it could be used to help fund full-day kindergarten. I feel that while I do wish the money had come back, it didn't. And I feel like it's there now. Collectively, I think we can do more with it than we can refunding the money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bulkey and fine committee members. Thank you for what you do. I am Representative John Burt. I'm in my 4th term. I live on 7 Bay Street in Lynchfield Park. I just want to let you know what I'm doing. I know Senator D'Alessandro, he's looking at the DRA to see what they can do for you guys to keep the money. That's what I understand. I'm also, all right, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Hopefully I am wrong. I have made several calls to the New Hampshire AG's office because I want them to investigate why this happened. I hope we can get to the bottom of it. If there's any, I doubt there's any criminal charges, but if there is, something needs to be done because this is unacceptable. In a private company, more people would have gone down the road just instead of just that one person. I also have calls into the DRA to see, if they'll look into this deeply, and I know you guys are talking with them from what I understand. I just want you to do the right thing, which is return the money. It's rightfully the taxpayers. I believe I have 2 votes on this committee that will return the money, but the rest of you can join. The rest of you can do the right thing and return that money. Now, today we did pass Senate Bill 193, the Education Savings Account, up to the State House. That is where the money is going to follow the students. The governor will sign that. And when it comes to the escrow, I heard that there was some talk about that you're going to save us from ourselves, that we don't know how to handle the escrow. We can handle that. So if we get this lump of money back, we'll be just fine. And then the following year, our taxes will go back up. We'll be fine. We can handle the money there. I'm hoping that this is going to be a wake-up call to the voters. In November, they come out. Sadly, in March, they don't. And it's sad that our voters, 22% of them, show up and vote in March. I hope this is a wake-up call. A $10.2 million mistake with the 2 tens. That is a huge mistake, especially that it's been going on for a long time. So I want to thank you for allowing me to speak, and please just return the money and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Good evening. My name is Jill Calvo, and I'm a Goffstown resident at Shirley Park. I have written some comments for you to consider. In an increasingly decisive political culture, we can all agree there is a growing distrust between the people and the government authority. This distrust stems from the many scandals and matters of gross negligence that occurs on the federal and state level. When I hear my town found $9.1 million, that isn't an error. That's gross negligence, a systematic problem that we are intent on fixing. It appears no less than a month ago that I read Goffstown tax rate will be slightly higher than expected due to an error by school officials. These last-minute errors affect us all. I would hope that the town officials know there is a growing number of the population living paycheck to paycheck, and these last-minute changes affect our livelihood. Now there has been another error by the same school board. So where is the accountability? If I were to make a $9.1 million mistake at my workplace, I would not be given the opportunity to resign. I would be fired immediately. When the bank makes a mistake, with my account, they don't put the money in their bank stock and manage it for me. They return it. This acute lack of transparency at hand appears to me as if the school board is corrupt. Now I understand
that Goffstown is doing well with the overall cost per student, and the school board is attempting to keep a tight ship. That does not allow for gross negligence to be swept under the rug. One good deed does not give reason to justify misappropriation of funds. Yes, the school board provided themselves several detailed options as to where the money should go. As delineated and deceptively good these options appear, I believe they went a little overboard, and they should have been one single bulleted option presented. Return all surplus money at the end of the fiscal year 2018. Anything less demonstrates the school board's belief that the public is inept in making financial decisions. I believe not only does the public carry a collective wisdom, but we know our best interests better than the school board, and saying otherwise is an insult to our intelligence. Moreover, Superintendent Brian Burke said if he had known that the money was accumulating, he would have absolutely returned it to tax relief the last several years. I believe Superintendent Brian Bach would save his day, he will return the money instead of a 5-option plan. The bottom line, this money does not belong to the school board, let above the school district. It belongs to we, the taxpayers. It is time to show more mutual trust and respect to the people you represent if you'd like our continued support moving forward.
Thank you. Any other comment this evening?
I have a quick one.
Hi, my name's Christy Garrison. I live at 288 Tibbetts Hill Road. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I appreciate the school board and Brian Balke's attempt to do the right thing. I think if it genuinely was a mistake, I think this is your opportunity to rectify that mistake and give the money back to the taxpayers. I don't want a scheduled plan. I'm very good at paying my mortgage on time. My escrow will not suffer. I brought my tax bill. My tax bill just, and I'm doing from last year to this year, has gone up $353. So now I'm at $9,775.24. And if there's $9.1 million of surplus money that should be returned to the taxpayers, that gets in my crawl when my taxes are gonna go up that much. So I'm hoping it was a mistake, you rectify it, there's transparency there, and you return it back to the rightful owners, which are the taxpayers that have already paid that tax money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Catherine Shea. I live in Goffstown. I have 4 kids in the school system. I just have a few words to say. I don't have anything fancy prepared, but I did want to represent a lot of voices of people that couldn't be here tonight. There were quite a few people on the Goffstown, New Hampshire Facebook page that had a lively discussion about this matter. And there were a lot of people, especially from the older community in our town, that were very concerned about this, that are living on very tight budgets. So one of the things, if anything, I wanted to represent tonight was the voice of those people that didn't get a chance to be here. In addition, there are a lot of families in our town that are struggling to make ends meet. So when you see a 5-point plan come out and it's money that really belongs in their pockets, people are going to get a little upset. I have some questions. I'm hoping maybe some light will be shed on it tonight if you're going to go into details about the due process that you plan to follow, whether there's additional activities that will happen subsequent to this. Interested to learn more, but I did want to make my voice heard as well as others that feel strongly that this money needs to be returned. It's a very tough world to make ends meet, and that means a lot to people in today's financial crisis that people are in. So I think that was basically all I wanted to say. I think everybody else covered most of the other points I had, so thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, members of the board. My name is Barbara Griffin. I'm a resident here in Goffstown. And I want to thank the superintendent's office and the board for being very forthright about it. This situation, I know this doesn't have anybody at this table terribly comfortable. And I appreciate the fact that you're dealing with this in public. I also appreciate the fact that things could be significantly worse in regards to where we are standing today. I happen to have an opportunity to speak to our Senator, Lou D'Alessandro. I know he's been in contact with some of you, so for your benefit and the members of the public, I also know that there have been meetings with DRA about what your options are here at this point, and that you're going to be discussing those later on. And I wanted to share at this point in the meeting a email that Senator D'Alessandro provided to me today. He was not able to be here tonight. He received information from DRA on December 22nd, and I'm happy to provide this email to you in regards to what needed to have happened, the apparent funds that have been retained in regards to School Board in New Boston, and delineating the 3 possible approaches for return of the money to the taxpayers, that the school district voters may vote to establish capital reserve funds and/or expendable trust funds, and to appropriate these funds, some or all of it, to those funds. That is an action that's authorized in statute. There is also an option for the legislature to enact a chapter law for the purposes of authorizing Goffstown and the New Boston districts to exceed the statutory cap on your unassigned fund balance and to retain it. And then the third option, as he has discussed with DRA, is to report it in the next, to DRA in the next tax rate setting session, in which case it would be calculated accordingly. I can just speak as one voice as a representative in Concord. I am not sure that a chapter law would be an appropriate approach. It certainly, I will tell you, it certainly could be done in this session in time for the next setting. However, quite honestly, I don't know that there would be a lot of support for it. I think this would be viewed as an issue for our district to deal with. There are also other districts who obviously have funding issues in the other direction, and I am not sure that people are really, quite honestly, going to feel that the district should be getting some sort of special chapter law passed in order to deal with this, when there are other options available, as you've heard here tonight, to simply return it or to have special articles. So I bring this email to you today from Senator D'Alessandro, who gives his apologies for not being here tonight. He had another commitment from 7 to 8. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
And I'm just going to pass this on.
Thank you. Any other further comments tonight?
Hi, John Dillon, Wallace Road, Goffstown. I'm not super happy to be here or even making a comment, but I feel a responsibility to do so. And wrote some comments, and have more comments and thoughts that I can fit in 3 minutes, but I'd like to give you what I can. I've read all the documents, I've watched the last meeting. I think I understand as much as I possibly can so far, but I don't really understand how this happened or why it happened. For example, how could it be that Ray, the business manager, or the head of the school board, or the head of the SAU, or even the budget committee chair, for that matter, could not realize this was going on or this happened? And so, for example, one question I have was there an account with $9 million sitting in front of somebody's eyes that they knew existed but didn't say something about? So did they know that money was there and not say something about it? It's conceivable to me that they didn't know it was there, that the state didn't even know because they weren't maybe fully aware that we weren't reporting under unspent monies. So I would reiterate Representative Burke's comments that it seems to me a great need for further investigation. How can we learn from this if we don't really understand what happened? Bottom line, the school board and the SAU submitted or paid Mr. Laborde to submit faulty paperwork for 6 years, and I don't imply that was intentional, but that's what happened. As a result, the state taxed us more than they should have. There's only one solution for the money to be given back to exactly the people from whom it was wrongly taken, from 2011 to 2017. I watched the last meeting. I want to thank you for your service. I know many of you have been serving for several years. I want to share, I felt it was a little, it is and was a little outrageous to hear the school board or the SAU for 1 minute talk about keeping the money. And I'd want to emphasize, the money is not yours to keep. Essentially, it is ill-gotten gains. Ill-gotten based on faulty reporting and incompetent oversight. At the December 19th school board meeting, you seem to want to minimize the seriousness of this event. It seems to me you're in a bubble, too used to spending taxpayers' money, even though I give you credit for being frugal where you have been. I want you to continue that. I'm a little concerned you're rationalizing the fact that you now have this $9 million. It's been gotten from the taxpayers. Now that you have it, you can take advantage of it. That would be Machiavellian. That would be letting, quote, no good crisis go to waste. As role models, I hope you don't teach that lesson. I can understand all the reasons and options for keeping the money, but the only options I want to be entertained, and I think many people, is how soon can the money get back to those who paid it unnecessarily? I don't think voters should decide. For starters, there's this fact: it's false to assume that all current voters are the ones who paid the money. Only homeowners who actually paid the property taxes during these specific years overpaid this money. Yes, presumably these taxpayers are all voters, but a big chunk of current voters are not homeowners. But a big chunk of current voters are not the homeowners or the co-homeowners that overpaid this tax money. Some didn't live here, some only arrived lately, and most voters are not specifically property taxpayers. But much more importantly than that, even though I think that's important, but more importantly, it's not right for you to have the money in the first place. It's just not right for you to have it. So don't skip over this fact so that you can consider keeping the money. It's not right for you to have it. So I expect you to do the right thing also. And I know you will. I certainly hope you will. There's only one right thing to do: give the money back, and it's maybe a messy, complicated problem, but give the money back to the taxpayers who overpaid. You need to do the hard work of getting the money back to the taxpayers' hands. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment this evening before we close? Going once? Okay, public comment is now closed. Which brings us to the discussion at hand. Brian, do you want to go over your handout?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is direct everyone to the handout that was on the table that's dated January 3rd, 2018. There are slight differences between the last document and this document, even though they look very, very similar. Some of the options that the board had reviewed at their last meeting have been removed from this new document, and some of the options for the board's consideration have been further elaborated and expanded upon. So just as I begin this, I do want to just clarify, I think we'll be able to address the content of what folks shared during public comment. There were several questions and several points. I would hope that we would be able to hit those as part of the discussion. I do want to clarify, though, I think it's important for people to know the $9.1 million came from more than just tax money. So unreserved fund balance comes from two places. It comes from the underspend of the general fund, and it also comes from the overcollection of revenue. So for example, New Boston paying tuition, if that money is paid in, that's all part of the surplus money that was accumulated. So it's incorrect to say that this money was all raised by taxation. It wasn't. But what I'd like to do is walk everyone through the handout that I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that the board would have to the extent that I can. I would say, I'd like to recognize and acknowledge we have several folks who might be able to also chime in. Our assessor is here, our town administrator is here, and I think they're both a wealth of information, as well as members of the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Committee. So what I'd like to do is just begin with the projections that have been made in terms of the potential tax relief are based on the numbers that the town uses. So I had these double-checked with Derek Horn, the finance director for the town, and these numbers are pulled from the MS1, which is a form that's submitted to the Department of Revenue Administration. And you can see the total equalized appropriation, total evaluation of the town is what was used to make the projections that I have before you. I'm not going to comment on the options in terms of the board's consideration, but there are 5. There were 5 last time, and as I said, some of these have been clarified and some have been changed. Option number 1, return all surplus money at the end of fiscal year 18. This is the default, folks. So in the absence of the board taking action for any of the other options that have been brought forth for your consideration, or for that matter, the legislature or the voters of Goffstown approving anything that the school board will be deliberating on this evening, if those aren't approved, the default position is this money all goes back. So I listed this as number 1. This is the position that if action isn't taken, this is the natural consequence of specifically what will occur with these surplus funds. So just, again, a little more information. The approximate value of 9.1 million is around, I will say approximately, $6.21 reduction in the local school tax rate from the, would appear on the December 2018 tax bill. Some of the folks who commented, including Representative Byrd, have indicated that we were and have been in contact with the Department of Revenue Administration. That is true. We have received a fair amount of guidance and support from the Department of Revenue, and I'd like to acknowledge and appreciate the guidance that they've given us. It is possible, and certainly the Board of Selectmen could weigh in on this potentially, that perhaps it could be more than one tax bill that monies were spread over, but that would be something for the town to do more investigation of. The school district doesn't have the ability to do that and to affect more than one tax billing. So the current tax rate is $14.63, which was reduced from $15.02. I will just remind you that the school board took the action to liquidate their 2.5% contingency fund, which was $570,613. That's all outlined and specified in the first press release that I had on the table up here. And again, all these documents are posted online. The new tax rate for the year would be approximately $8.81 for the local school portion. Remember, this is just one element. You have a town rate, you have a local school rate, you have a state school tax rate, and we also have the county rate. So this would just be the school portion of that. The potential reduction on a $200,000 house would be approximately $1,242. I will say there's been a lot of conversation and public comment specifically about the impact on the escrow accounts. I will say that I received, I would say, several phone calls, probably 3 or 4 phone calls and several emails, and the information that I received from community members was very consistent with public comment this evening. The input that people told me, that constituents who called me indicated, don't worry about the escrow accounts, we'll take care of that. I will say I have been concerned, I know that the Board of Selectmen is concerned, and the town officials are concerned, that many of the people who have money, which by the way is about 50% of all the taxpayers in Goffstown, have their property taxes paid through an escrow account. I do have concerns that people will be able to navigate the impact of this on their mortgages. I don't disagree, they're adults, it's their responsibility to manage. I do think we could provide and share information. The town could certainly do that, so people had a good understanding of what they were gonna go through. I will say, I received no calls and no emails that anyone was saying, that's an important thing, keep reviewing how we could stabilize the tax rate. I didn't receive those calls. The, the information that are it's in the box at the bottom of page 1, I'm very grateful and appreciative of the counsel that I received from the town assessor, Scott Bartlett, and the information that Scott shared with me. There are approximately 6,400 properties in Goffstown. 40% of these properties have transferred since 2011. So that was a pretty significant number to me, and it was considerably higher than I had anticipated. Approximately 10% of these properties have transferred since April 2017. 58% of all properties have the same owner since 2011. And as I said before, about half of the property taxpayers in town pay their property taxes through an escrow account. So when we talk about the implications on the escrow account, half the community members of Goffstown. It is important, if you're not aware, that next year is a reevaluation year for the town as well. So the town will be going through a town-wide comprehensive reassessment next year, and that will impact the overall equalized assessed tax rate, tax base for the entire community. This is something that is probably not going to be very popular if you lived in Goffstown and sold your house a year or two ago, but taxpayers who sold their properties will not benefit from a tax rate reduction. And when you sell a property, you sell rights and privileges of that property. One thing that I did receive, I received a couple of emails from folks who no longer live here, and they were concerned that they lived in this town, they were part of money that should have been returned systematically over the last several years, and they were upset and frustrated that potentially they will not receive any benefit. I have indicated to them, as I will to you this evening, we absolutely recognize that. We see that as a major potential issue here, and one that is very complicated in terms of how to rectify that. And it is something that it has been on the board's consideration, and certainly the Board of Selectmen is acutely aware of this as well. Do you want me to stop and pause for questions between going?
Brian?
Please?
Is that a state decision, or where does that come from?
The comment that when you sell a property, well, that's, I would say, I don't know that I could point to a state statute or any kind of code of administrative rules, but in terms of the transfer of real estate and property, that's what happens with property transfers, and certainly someone who is a realtor or maybe understands that better than I could explain that. But that's my understanding, is that when you sell a property, you sell the rights and privileges associated with it.
Let me go down this road for a moment. The only way for us to be able, for that money to be able to return to individuals who own the property at a time that we could do some math, would have had that occur in 2012, 2013, 2014, and today's current law would to be have a session law, a chapter law, passed by the House, the Senate, and signed by the governor. Is that an accurate statement?
I believe it is, Dan. Currently, there is no mechanism, no methodology for the school district to issue any kind of tax refunds. The town could certainly speak to that on the town side, but there is nothing that would allow the school district to go back and say, during fiscal year 2012, here were the community members who lived here. Here was the amount that they were taxed. Here was the amount of surplus, and to have any kind of an accounting methodology to be able to do that, to my knowledge, does not exist.
So when we heard from Representative Griffin earlier, she had mentioned that she had been in contact with Senator D'Alessandro, and in her opinion, it did not look like there was perhaps a lot of interest in Concord of having a chapter law, or perhaps it was better for us to handle it locally, which means we're back to the default. If we do nothing, it goes to the property owner at the time the assessor's records would be on December or whatever date of 2018. Not even last year of 2017, but the date that's going to be coming forward where the new tax rate would be set.
I believe that's accurate. I think that would actually be April 1st.
Do we know what that date is, Adam, or?
Yeah, Scott would probably be the one to come up with Adam. Thank you both for being here.
Hi, I'm Scott Bartlett. I am a resident of Goffstown, but I'm also the town assessor. The assessment date, or the assessment year, is April 1st to March 31st. We assess property, physically, what is there as of April 1st. For taxation purposes, we send the tax bill to whoever is the owner at the time that that tax bill goes out. So the first bill will go out in May. Who's ever the owner of the property as of that time will receive the tax bill. Second tax bill goes out in December. Again, if the property were to transfer, it would go to the new owner. Taxes go with the property, not with an owner. Once that owner sells that property, any property taxes that are due would go with the property.
So if I may, if you sell a piece of property on November 15th and the tax bill goes out on November 20th, I give a 5-day leeway, the settlement papers, the HUD statements, would include whatever estimates there were in taxes between the buyer and seller, and the new owner, as of that November 15th, would perhaps see this reduction if it all went back to the taxpayers. Because there would be no estimated reduction in the May bill, because it's not technically known yet, even though we kind of know what it is. It would all be when the tax rate is actually set by DRA in November.
There is some discussion right now that I've had with Adam, that I've had with Derek. We're going to have it with the selectmen as to how we can spread that out over maybe the entire year. However, until we have that discussion, we need to speak with the DRA. It's difficult to give you an answer to that.
Okay.
Typically, the first tax bill is based on 50% of the previous year's taxes.
Okay.
There is a statute in the law that gives you some wiggle room on that. But again, until I meet with the selectmen, until we meet with the DRA, I really can't comment on to how that would actually work. A lot of it depends upon what happens here and what happens in March. Until we know what the school board decides to do with that money, the town doesn't know how to respond to that.
Well, if I may, the school board doesn't well, we can do things with the money, but I think all of our conversations have floated around the conversations have floated around in previous meetings about allowing taxpayers, or voters actually, technically, make decisions, so I understand.
And that's why I said March. I think March is the most important one.
Okay.
Whatever happens in March will dictate to us, we'll know at that point what's going to happen with that money.
Okay.
And then the selectmen can make a decision as how to proceed on, which would be the May and the December tax bill.
And just to clarify, the significance of March would be, of course, if we decided to put forward a warrant article to establish a capital reserve fund for a project, should it pass or fail. That's what you're talking about with March.
Correct.
I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page with understanding. What do you have, Adam?
Adam Jacobs, Town Administrator. As Scott mentioned, the DRA indicated that they would be willing to at least investigate the possibility of accelerating a return to taxpayers using the first bill of 2018. But until we know the outcome, we can't have that discussion with them. It's possible that as early as the 9th of January, we could start those discussions if the board chooses the default option tonight, and no petition articles are brought forward to spend that money before the deadline of the 9th. Then we know the outcome, right? We know that money is at least, the 9.1 anyway, would be a potential surplus at the end of June. So in theory, the next Board of Selectmen meeting in January, we could discuss, and then we could start those conversations with the DRA in January if need be. If articles are brought forward to the warrant, then we would have to delay that discussion.
Okay. Thank you. Does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you for now.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Anything else on option number 1? Okay,
Go ahead.
moving on, option number 2. As the board is aware and members of the public are aware, we have the ability to keep a net appropriation of 2.5% on the books. This money can only be used for 2 purposes, and this is created by statute. One purpose is for the reduction of taxes, for tax relief, and the second is for emergency expenditures, which have to be approved by the Commissioner of Education. At this point, that money has been liquidated. That was the money that we used to reduce the tax rate to $14.63 back in December after working with the Board of Selectmen to receive permission to do that. The maximum deposit, according to the Department of Revenue Administration, right now for the Goffstown School District is $615,131. Any questions I can answer regarding option number 2?
So basically, right now, we have no emergency money because that account
Correct.
has been liquidated.
Correct.
Empty that in November.
Correct. So what are examples of emergency? That would be if we know that the Maple Ave roof needs to be replaced, if we had a significant roofing issue, if we had a heating system go down, any of those kinds of things would be considered likely approved or options that could be considered by the Commissioner of Education as emergency expenditures.
And we did that to help the taxpayer at that point when we thought we had a small problem.
Correct. So we've actually used that money 2 different times. The first time we asked for and received, after having a joint public hearing with the Budget Committee, we used that money to pay for the high school drainage project. People remember, we've had significant flooding here at the high school. We've paid for 2 gym floors. We've had significant increases in our property liability insurance. We used that money as part of the funding for the drainage project that we did out back. The second time, Ginny, you're correct, was for the tax relief for this past December bill. Anything else, anything further on number 2 that I can address? Okay, number 3. Provide the voters an option or perhaps several options to manage the release of this surplus money. So I'm going to go through, and if you compare this current evening's document with last meeting's document, it has been changed and reduced. So there are elements within RSA 35 that allow municipalities and school districts to create capital reserve funds. And there's a very specific list that we can create capital reserve funds. There's a specific process. It needs to be approved by the voters, et cetera. So just a couple of these that have remained on the list. I have removed several of these, and again, if you compare the 2 documents, you'll see what those are. So under RSA 35:1, we can create capital reserve funds to consider things like construction, reconstruction, or look at other capital improvements. So this would be, examples would be when I mentioned the roof at Maple Ave. So the roof at Maple Ave is going to need to have significant repairs and replacement. It's in the CIP matrix. That's an example of a project that could be a capital project. Boilers, heating systems, all of those kinds of things would be the typical kinds of capital projects. I would encourage you, if you're so inclined, we have a very comprehensive capital improvement plan list that goes through the CIP process every year. It gets approved by the CIP committee. It gets approved by the Board of Selectmen. All those projects that the school district has identified are on the CIP matrix, and you could certainly review those. So I provided some sample language of what establishing a capital reserve fund for the purpose of capital improvements planning could look like. The $250,000 is an arbitrary number. I don't want anyone to read into that any more than it should be. You have to have a placeholder for a dollar amount, and we put $250,000. So that's specific language that the board could consider if you were so inclined to move forward with the creation of a capital reserve fund. The Budget Committee will know this is something that we've talked about for several years now. We don't have any current capital reserve funds in this school district. We had a capital reserve fund for the Bartlett project, many years ago that was closed and liquidated as part of the renovations that we've done there. So we don't have any kind of a savings account, if you will, for anything that might go wrong. Roofing, heating systems, any of those kinds of projects, we don't currently have money specifically allocated through any kind of reserve funds for those types of activities. You can create a capital reserve fund for land acquisition. This is specific language that the board could consider if you were so inclined to create a capital reserve fund that would allow monies to be used for a land purchase at some point in the future. That information is provided there for the board if you are interested in looking at that. The next piece would be an outright land purchase. I'm not going to get into a lot of details here, but I think it is fair to say the public should be aware. We've had very ongoing public discussions for the last several years. We've had a public walkthrough of land. There are 110 acres behind Goffstown High School that way between Norman Road and Wallace Road. There are 2 parcels. The school district has expressed interest in those. Historically, in the past, the town had this land as I think it was a citizen's petition warrant article at the time. I don't think it was directed from the Board of Selectmen, but this is land that the town has looked at a number of times. I will not be coy in that we have interest in this land. I think the community is aware that we investigated the purchasing of the villa and the potential that the villa could have, along with all the acreage that was attached to that. That ended up not being something that was worth us pursuing, given how much work that land, the building needed, but the land is certainly of value. So that land purchase is something that the board has looked at and talked about, and for this, we have 2 different, and I apologize, I think the ink was dry when we put them on the table, but this has been right up to this evening that we've been collecting and getting information and compiling it into these documents. So we had 2 different looks at a warrant article that would be available for the board's consideration for land purchase. One was from our school district attorney, and the other was from the Department of Revenue Administration. We didn't have the opportunity to combine them and get approval from either party, so I just included them both separately, but I think you get the flavor. So this would be if the board was interested in moving forward and putting forth the possibility of the voters considering a land purchase. I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions. You'll see that we did remove a number of things here. The board, at the last meeting, I had proposed the possibility of looking at a different model for ongoing tax relief, which included zeroing out accounts associated with facilities, buildings and grounds.
Zone 1.
We okay? All right. Sorry, that was very distracting. A couple of options that we removed, we could create a capital reserve fund for special education purposes. That has been removed from this document. And another option was to consider level funding at 0 all future budgets for the next 5 or more years to allow for tax relief through budget reductions and allow the creation of a capital reserve fund for facilities, ongoing maintenance. I removed that. There didn't seem to be much interest from the board, so that's been removed from this document. So at this point, that's all I have for number 3. Might ask if there are any clarifications I can provide.
Yeah.
We talked about at a previous meeting, and actually I think it was last year, we had brought it up to the budget committee, the possibility of having a warrant article setting aside some money, and the actual verbiage in there was not something we could all agree on in the timeline we had. And none of that is included in the suggested terminology here. Is this verbiage directly from the RSA, or do we get the opportunity of saying something in a warrant article that says specifically for that the money could only be used after a public hearing and after it, must be on the capital planning document that went through the entire public process.
So that's precisely correct, Dan, and Mike and other members of the Budget Committee will remember that we had these conversations last year.
Yep.
We certainly could include language that specifically said only items that are in the approved capital improvement plan matrix can be considered. You can certainly include language in the establishment of a capital reserve fund around having a public hearing. My thinking specifically focusing on approved CIP matrix items would be, I don't want anyone coming in saying they're gonna surprise us with turf field and lights, and that's not on the CIP matrix, that hasn't gone through the CIP process, and that the school district is trying to slip that in. So
Right.
the CIP matrix, it's pretty much exactly what you would think. It's building maintenance, renovations, building repairs. We have a pretty comprehensive plan, but what we don't have, folks, is we've never had an established funding methodology for those projects. So when you look at it, and the approved CIP matrix that has $1 million, sometimes more dollars associated with it, the school district has not built those numbers into our budgets, our operating budgets, historically, nor have we established capital reserve funds for those types of projects. We will need to replace old boilers at Mountain View Middle School. We will need to replace roofs. We will need to replace the septic system at Mountain View is original. It's never been replaced, it's never been repaired. So these are all things that I promise you will be things that will break and that we will have to take into account and we'll have to deal with. And we currently have no account expressly set up for those purposes. But you're right, Dan, you could create it for CIP approved with the public hearing and public input.
Thank you.
I think it's important to note too that the CIP board is its own board. It's overseen
Yep.
by, it's not overseen by us.
No,
So I think
it's-
that helps.
Right.
Anything further on item number 3, option number 3? Okay. Moving on to special legislation, I think we've actually had some really helpful public comment in this regard. I'd like to thank our state reps who are here this evening, and thank you for joining us. In fact, Senator D'Alessandro has been in contact with me, has been in contact with the school board. He has offered to be supportive if we wanted to pursue the possibility of some type of special legislative process, chapter law, et cetera. He has not weighed in that he thinks one idea is a good idea or a bad idea in any way. He just offered to help facilitate the process. He wanted me to share with you, as the representative stated, that he was sorry he wasn't able to be here this evening. He did have a conflict, and he asked to receive a phone call tomorrow with any updates that we can share with him. He did also indicate to me, and I think this is important for the public's information, that at this point, the legislative process, the timeline has elapsed. So in order to even consider any type of a piece of special legislation, there would need to be approval by the Rule Committee to allow that to occur, is the information that the senator has shared with me. So I won't belabor this, but there, as I see it, within the creation of special legislation, there would be 3 different opportunities that the school district could consider working with our local elected officials regarding. Option number 1, under RSA 198:4B, the school district is allowed to retain up to 2.5% of their annual appropriation after it's approved by the voters. That could be expanded. So one thing that could be explored was to allow the retention beyond the 2.5% fund. Option number 2, to allow the Goffstown and/or New Boston school districts to create a reserve account similar to towns. So the town is able to keep an unreserved fund balance and carry it on their books. And every town does this. Currently, RSA 198:4B3 only allows one New Hampshire school district to be able to do that, and that's the city of Manchester. So one option would be to explore if something similar to the arrangement with Manchester could be explored. And lastly, Number 3, to allow the creation, so within RSA 35, there are a number of options of how and under what circumstances you can create capital reserve funds. What I've provided here is sample language that would allow for 35:1-D, which would be new proposed legislation, which would allow a capital reserve fund specifically created for the sole purpose of tax relief. So this is not to fix the boiler at Mountain View. This is not to put turf and lights and those kinds of things here at the high school. This would be just exclusively for tax relief, which would allow the purposeful, intentional, systematic return of money to allow for stabilization and keeping the tax rate as flat as the board and the Board of Selectmen would be so inclined. This is proposed language. If the board was so inclined, I know that there could be other elements. Mr. Cloutier had some recommendations that this wording didn't include, but Dan, I did try to get all of the things that you had mentioned last time in terms of allowing for a public hearing and allowing for the purpose of the creation of the fund to be made. This would have to go through the legislative process. It would have to be approved by the House and the Senate and the governor. But then this would be the opportunity for the voters to decide, do you want to create a capital reserve fund for the stabilization of tax relief? That's what this particular proposed language would set out to do. There could be other bills that could be considered. I do think timing is important. I appreciate that Representative Griffin had indicated that she thought we could get this through the process. I would have to trust our local folks who have more knowledge about this than I would. So I might pause there and ask if there are any questions or anything further that I can clarify around potential proposed special legislation.
Go ahead, Dan.
If I may, from everything I've heard tonight and since the last meeting, you're right, I haven't heard one person say, you know, that's a great idea, let's stabilize it. It's either give it all back or just nothing. So this particular thing wouldn't work. And it's a lot of work, because it's not just us, it's another 425 people up in Concord. That, for what purpose, we don't know. And it completely takes out the taxpayers, because it doesn't allow us to put a warrant to ask the taxpayers if they want to do this.
So actually,
And that could be something if we wanted to do, but that seems to be a bit much too at this point.
so not to belabor this, but what I was attempting here, Dan, was to allow the creation and to allow the voters in March to be able to decide
Okay.
if they wanted. So
Right,
the
okay. That's what
special.
we had talked about.
Yeah, and I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear, that this isn't to create the fund. This is to create the legislation that would allow the voters to consider a warrant article for the creation of a fund for this
Okay.
sole, exclusive, limited purpose. And I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, I continue to not be interested in this option. It's not something.
I'm not interested in that option at this point.
I think that we should pursue yourself.
Any other thoughts, comments, points of clarification?
I said my piece on this last time. It's not my preferred option at all, particularly given the fact, as Barbara Griffin noted, we have other options here. If we had nothing else, then, you know, I'd view this differently.
Okay, moving on to number 5, and this is the last one. So we had some pretty engaging conversation about this at the last school board meeting. So just to provide a little context here, folks, we have 3 current, what I would call ongoing cost obligation in terms of payments. The Goffstown High School renovation, I'm sure everyone's familiar, this building was renovated in 2001. It was a 20-year note. That note is set to expire in 2022. So before I get into all the detail, and I gave you a lot of detail here, I was originally concerned, we receive school district building aid from the state. Right now, building aid for any new project is set at 0. The legislature does not fund any new school building aid projects. I would say with the exception of a public school infrastructure fund that was created this year, that was a new project that the governor brought forward for things like safety projects and broadband dark fiber connection projects. But school building aid doesn't exist anymore. But the state has continued to meet the obligations of existing approved bonds. So this bond, we still owe quite a bit of money in both principal and interest on the high school bond. I was concerned that if we paid this note off early, that we would potentially jeopardize our ability to receive about $280,000 a year in revenue from the state for school building aid. Had a very positive, very productive conversation with the Department of Education, and they are committed to paying off their obligation. And if you look at page 5, these two tables let you know how much money we're talking about. This is about $1.35 million that the state has identified as continued obligation for the Goffstown High School bond project. If we paid the bond off early, the state would still make good on their payments. That's the second table on page 5. You can see that it's an FY18 and FY19 payment of about $280,000, and then the state would make good on the remaining $800,000 during their next biennial budget. So that was the information that I received from the Department of Education. However, in looking specifically at the contract and looking at the information that we have, it is not going to be an option for us to pay this bond off early. So this option is off the table. We did receive notification from our attorney late this afternoon that in working with the lender, the bonds themselves have to mature through the duration of the project. So this option, unfortunately, which I think is a good option to look at, particularly given that the Department of Ed was going to make good on building aid payments, this one is off the table. So I'll just keep going.
Well, I think it would truly note to the public who would more interest, this is not the original payment schedule that we had negotiated. We had negotiated a much more favorable, much more lower rate that saved the interest payments.
Right.
And in a guarantee of lowering the interest payments to that level, they were guaranteed to get those interest payments for us to make the payments in the years so stipulated, and denied us the ability to pay it off early.
Right, so what this is think about refinancing with a better rate. So that was the equivalent of this. But I will say, we continue to learn, and we continue to try to do the best we can to identify how we can continue to improve our situation. In working with the Department of Ed through the process of exploring the building aid, we discovered that it appears the New Hampshire Department of Education owes us $261,000 in building aid from FY 2012. I had never heard about this information, I'd never been made aware of it, but apparently the previous business administrator was aware of this. So I have explored this, we will continue to look at this, and if you look at the payment schedule, I didn't include it all, but during the FY12 year, the school district only received $35,195.82 from the Department of Education for state building aid, and we believe we've been shorted $261,000 going back to FY12. So that information was shared with me within the last day, and the Department of Education has identified that they believe there is an obligation to the community of Goffstown for that money. So we'll continue to work. That was news to me.
I could not be more disappointed. I don't even.
I agree.
No.
Honeywell Phase 2. So this was a $2.1 million project. This has been paid for by energy savings. So this has included the retrofitting of boilers to allow for things like dual fuel, propane versus oil, low voltage lighting, LED lighting, motion sensors in rooms so that lights turn off automatically, some of those kinds of things. And that project could be paid off early. So our attorney spoke with our lender for this. This is Pinnacle Public Financing, and we would be able to pay this note off if it was the board's pleasure to do so. There is a prepayment penalty of 2.1%. So this total $2.1 million project would be a buyout price of $1,692,178.55. So that one is an option for the board's consideration. By and large, that would, the money for this project has been identified through cost avoidance of energy savings. So we would, it's maybe not as clean as just paying off a bond, but this is money that could be paid off early, again, if it was the board's consideration to do so. And the last option, and again, I shared this in my opening remarks, the fact that we financed $573,000 to buy modular classrooms is outrageous to me because we have overcrowding in the Goffstown schools. Our elementary schools are busting at the seams. We used impact fee money that we received from development, and we bonded this money. We put in a new library. It is a modular building at Bartlett, and we put in a 4-classroom quad addition. That again, folks, I will say, brick and mortar attached to the building is where I would want my kids and where I feel badly that kids aren't in, but this is the circumstance that we're in. So for this piece here, I apologize. I tried to have as much of this resolved as I could this evening. Over the holiday, folks weren't around, and we did get confirmation from the lender, which is First American, that they've indicated that they're willing to work with us and to look at expediting the acceleration of the bond payments and paying this off early, but I will say it is unconfirmed at this time. I do not have a guarantee, and First American was making internal decisions through their management if they would allow us to do this. So again, I apologize to the board. I know you wanted as much information as we could possibly get, and that was as far as our attorney was able to get on that project. So with that, I might stop there and ask if there are any questions that I can answer on certainly the Honeywell project or the elementary modular classroom project. Again, recognizing that paying off the high school bond is not going to be possible.
And the only motivation we would have for paying off any of these is if it was a long-term gain for the community.
And in fact, yeah.
That's the only way it makes sense, is if it ultimately reduces what our community pays in interest.
And in fact, the Honeywell, it's an extra payment.
Yep.
So they're charging us a surplus, an excise, amount, whatever, 2.1%. So it's not cheaper, it's more. Any other questions I can address on that?
And we don't have all the information we need on the modular classrooms?
We got as much information as we were able to do over the vacation week last week. First American had agreed that they would look into this further. They were having internal meetings, and we couldn't get an answer by today. So again, I do apologize that we weren't able to get that information in preparation for today.
I doubt that they would have a very good answer. I was kind of expecting this for a response since it's a lease, because it's not like having a loan where you have a principal and you have an interest. We are renting the modulars for 5 years.
With a $1 buyout.
With a $1 buyout at the end. So typically, if you were paying early, which you would typically not have in a lease, you're going to be still paying because you've signed that you're going to rent it for 5 years with a $1 buyout. So I don't see this, they probably don't even have really a mechanism. It would probably take them a lot of work to figure out how they're still going to make money, and I don't think the discount would be enough for us really to consider it as a viable option.
Makes sense.
I think that's accurate.
Is this leases, are they regulated by the banking department?
And not for this.
Not for this one? Okay. I didn't know if there was any paperwork that was available so it's probably not done often, and that's why they have to think about it.
Correct.
Yeah.
We had really hoped to hear back from them,
Right.
and we just,
And that's why I'm not
Time didn't allow.
surprised that because they don't have a mechanism. Whoever you're talking to is not really going to have that answer because it's probably something that does not come up. So trying to find out if there could even be an answer would take time for them.
but we haven't been hopeful that it would be a good answer.
Correct.
And I don't see any reason to
Yeah.
think that
And
it's gonna be anything to belabor.
Yeah.
And it's good to get the information, so we know that.
I think it's very good to get the information to know that's not a viable option to really consider.
Anybody have anything else?
I have some thoughts in general, if that helps.
Go ahead, Rick.
Actually, Lori, would it be okay with you? I just had 2 additional
Sure.
points. If I could just finish my
Finish it
handout,
up.
then the board can continue to deliberate on this. I think it's important to remember that only up to 10% above what the Budget Committee recommends can be approved, and that the warrant article sequence is important. So this is just something that we should be aware of, working with the Budget Committee. And the last piece is the current discussion around $9.1 million is money that was on the books as of July 1st, 2017. That does not include anything such as I stated, over collection of revenue for this year. So no, 9.1 million doesn't include if there's any money from this school year. So for example, last year, or maybe it was the year before, we had an influx of kids move into New Boston, and we picked up about $350,000 that we weren't anticipating in tuition money. Examples in those kinds of scenarios, including an underspend of the general fund, are not part of the 9.1 million. So just to clarify that. And that's all I got.
All right, thank you. Lori, you had some remarks?
Yes. So some of my thoughts would be that addressing the 9.1 million should be by the voters, that they can decide on that. So I would not be in favor of taking the 2.5 out of that. If we have unreserved at the end of this year, I think we could consider that, but I think the voters should decide on that 9.1 because it's from the past. And really, there's 2 areas that I think would be important from the warrant articles, because there are 2 areas we have been considering for years, which would be the CIP for capital reserve, because for years we've been discussing that, so I think the voters should really get a chance to decide if they actually want to fund that. And the other one would be land purchase, because that is another one that we have been discussing publicly for years, and this would be a good opportunity for the voters to decide whether or not they want to be able to pay for that straight out without affecting their taxes, as opposed to trying to have multiple bites at the apple of how to pay it over years. So those would be 2 of the ones I would be in favor for warrant articles for the voters to decide on.
I just want to clarify what you mean by the 9.1, letting the voters decide. Because honestly, if we put forward no warrant articles, then it
they
just goes back.
Correct.
So just to clarify.
So to
that
clarify
what you're
is whether or
expressing
not they want to
is-
use that money towards something else as opposed to tax relief at the end of the period.
And if they vote yes, then it would, and if the majority voted towards yes, yes. If not, it all goes back. Anyway.
Yes.
And so what you're saying is using part of this for these 2 projects, and then whatever's left
And whatever is
going
left
back?
would go back.
Okay.
well, if I may,
I mean, go ahead, Dan.
it's also possible that the money to fund the capital reserve for CIP-approved projects and whatever money that, if we would go forward to put aside for land, could come out of the current year unexpended appropriation and not out of the 9.1. So it's not really a decision by the taxpayers. It's really the 9.1's going back. One fell swoop, or however the town gets to talk to DRA to see if they can do it in 2. Because I'm looking at this, and if we think about the squeezing that we have done over the years, and you look at 9.1, you divide it by 6 or 7, that's a lot of money. And that's a lot more money than what these 2 things may total up to,
Well, it's much
which
more.
would be current year unexpended appropriation, not the 9.1. And it's possible that we may be able, if we are very sensitive to that, we could word the warrant article potentially, we'd have to check with DRA, that it would be out of current unexpended appropriations and not the typical wording that would say something like undesignated surplus funds available on July 1st. Because that would
Or-
include the 911.
The tax impact.
There would be no, right, and it preserves the integrity of what has occurred in the past, and this would only be based on what's current.
But that would be the assumption that we have enough to cover those.
That's right. And if there wasn't enough to cover it, it couldn't be done. So that's one way to going. It's one way of thinking about it. So that's a discussion point.
What it comes down to more than anything else is that we need to make a decision.
Yep.
Because even if we put warrant articles on, we need to make a decision, do we or do we not recommend them? So this isn't a matter of just putting something down there and saying, you tell us. We need to be making calculated, thoughtful decisions about what we recommend based upon vision.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, this isn't about putting together menu items for people to choose from at the general election. This is, for us to decide what it is we're going to advocate for that we think is in the best interest of the district. And so, that's our task.
Ginny?
And I think, listening to, and I understand it completely because, this has me completely stymied. But I think listening to the anger, and justifiably so, but I would hate for people to come out and just vote no, because our budgets are so conservative to begin with. I would hate people to think that we're doing something crazy here that we have not been doing. It was a mistake that went by an awful lot of people, auditors, a lot of people who no money, no budgets, that we've depended upon to give us the facts that we need to do our jobs well. We're not the only people that have looked at this. A lot of people who really should have found this and given us the facts that we needed have not. So I'm really hoping that people that are angry now, think a little bit and are not going to come back and vote no to all of our really carefully thought out conservative budgets in years to pass. But it scares me right now listening to what I hear in social media, what I hear in public. I'm hoping this is not going to negatively impact our kids. And in looking at what we're making decisions on right now, I think we really have to think about that, because if we have no emergency money, if we have no capital reserves, if we have nothing right now, and we're going to give all this money back, and none of our budgets are going to pass, and we're going to live on default budgets, the kids in Goffstown are really going to lose. And we've worked hard over very many years to build up not only our reputations, but to make our schools be in a place where we can really be proud of. And the people of this town that, are really mad at us, and I don't blame them, but their kids get a really good education here. The children of New Boston get a really good education here. And so I'm hoping that we can continue that. But I think sane our minds or have to prevail here and really make some conscious decisions over what we need to do moving forward with this money and with voting in the future. So that's what I'm thinking. I need to be cautious with this so that our kids continue to get a good education.
That's what we're here for.
Exactly.
We're trying to provide.
Exactly, and I hope to continue it.
Heather, did you have something? Oh, I thought I saw your hand.
Diane,
Go ahead.
I do. I just wanted to echo what you said, Ginny, because regardless of who's sitting at this table, if we are thinking of it as a business, not having a contingency fund, not having that money that anybody would need to, having that savings account where you can look to that money to run in a proper way, is not good for the board, it's not good for the schools, it's not good for the town, because then you're being reactive to the situation. So I'm also concerned that whatever we put on for warrant articles, somebody, I think we need to do a lot to make people understand why that's important for the school, regardless of the 9.1 million. The other thing I just want to clarify, there was a concern expressed by the audience during public comment about the money going back to those who paid in. But I think what I'm hearing is that's not possible. Any decision around the 9.1 will go back to current taxpayers. Is that correct?
So
That's
just,
our understanding.
yeah, just to clarify, there is no mechanism for the school district to be able to make tax returns for anything of that nature. So the only thing we can do is what we should have done every year, which is at the end of the year, we have to submit forms to the Department of Revenue Administration as well as the Department of Education, indicating what our fund balance is, over collection of revenue, underspend of the general fund. That money by default cannot be kept on the books. So when I say we can only keep 2.5% of the total appropriation, that's just over $600,000. That's it. There should not have been a dime more in the bank beyond that. And that should have been identified, it should have been called out, someone should have notified that there was an issue here, and that didn't happen. But be that as it may, we have no opportunity to make direct payments to taxpayers. All we can do, unfortunately, I think it puts the town and certainly the Board of Selectmen in a difficult situation. The town has more options, and I don't want to speak for the town, but we have none.
We have limited options.
We have no options to be able to issue checks.
Oh, no, no,
You know,
no,
or
right.
I think that's what I'm
Right.
sorry.
Sorry.
That's what I thought Retta was saying.
No, because that was one of the first questions we asked.
Right.
Where, you find out, and what do you do?
Right.
One of the first questions was, can you just write a check? And the simple answer is no. There's no legal mechanism to do that. Therefore, the only mechanism is any unreserved fund as of June 30th goes back. And to be clear, we can't keep it, which I know we all know, but I hear a lot of commentary around us talking about keeping it. We can't keep it. We can recommend a warrant article, and if it passes, then we can appropriate those funds towards whatever was approved by the voters. Otherwise, no, it's all going back.
I've got one thing as well.
Go ahead, Dan.
As I start and keep looking at the 9.1 million, 9.1 million is the number that's derived as of June 30th, 2017. In December, in conjunction with the selectmen, $570,613 of that 9.1 has already been returned to the taxpayers. That's the money we took out of the 2.5% fund. Because when we had adopted to fund that, that had come out of that 9.1 million. And that was done afterwards. Does that make sense? Do you see where I'm coming from? Because we returned it at the end? Or does that 9.1 not include that calculation?
You know, I would probably put that question to our auditor, but I think the 9.1 is separate from the 570.
Okay.
But again,
It would have been a
wanna
net
miss-
amount. That would be, I'd be interested in understanding that answer.
To echo it, that was my understanding, is that it was not, but
And-
I would rather.
But I would also say, just to be clear, we have not received our audit report.
Right.
This board receives a presentation from the auditor every year. The auditor will be here at some point when the report's finished. It's a question we can ask him.
Okay. So the process at this point is, since the Budget Committee is meeting tomorrow,
They are.
we are looking to have any motions to include warrant articles tonight. Is
Deadline
that,
technically is Tuesday, but ideally, yes, if we are going to do something, I would like to give the budget committee time to consider it and to
Okay.
decide if they support it.
because next Tuesday is the public hearing.
Yes.
And any warrant article associated with money needs to have a public hearing by the budget committee in order to move forward to the deliberative session.
Correct.
Okay.
And again, time is of the essence. I'd rather give them time to
Acknowledged.
consider it.
And weather is not on our side.
No,
WEATHER?
time's not on our side, nor is this one for tomorrow. So moving forward, does anybody else have any commentary, thoughts, et cetera? Based on what I understand our conversation to be thus far, GHO is paying off the bond, which it would be lovely to be able to save interest.
Out.
Is out. We are in agreement, regarding the special legislation, to not pursue special legislation. Additionally, paying off Honeywell is off the table, and as is the modular classrooms, which is leaving us with funding the 2.5% contingency fund up to an amount of $615,000. And honestly,
Well, actually, that's not even
doesn't
part
have
of
to be
it.
done tonight.
That's not even
Doesn't.
part of it.
Just trying to summarize
Sure.
where we find ourselves here, and then if we were to put a warrant article for land purchase, or if we were going to do any other warrant article. Okay.
Can I summarize it the way I do?
But then that wouldn't be a summary. Go ahead, Dan.
No, what it would be is, if you think about it, nothing that is presented to us to do anything with the 9.1 million is anything that I'm interested in doing, at all. What I am interested in doing is discussing the two warrant articles that we have been talking about for years. And so it has nothing to do with money that's been found. It has to do with whether or not this is the appropriate time to put those articles on the warrant, just like we've done every year for the last number of years. And that's the Capital Reserve Fund for approved CIP projects and for potentially a capital fund to purchase land. Those are the only two that I would particularly be interested in discussing at the moment.
Actually, if I can just clarify, so for the land acquisition, you could create a capital reserve fund, that's one of the purposes identified under RSA 35, or you could have wording that it's just an outright purchase and not the creation of a capital reserve fund for future land purchase. So for the land, you have two different options to consider.
Understand.
Thank you.
I noticed there's a non-public,
We do.
and so I would defer anything on that until after.
But I'd like to
non-public.
get as much of our discussion as we can done here.
Sure.
And then what I'll do is I'm going to open the floor again to public comment.
Sure.
And then we'll handle any other business and then go into non-public.
The only thing I would like to see a consensus is if people are interested in the CIP approved projects and at what dollar amount. Because that's something we've been talking about for years and it has nothing to do with money that has come to light, in my opinion.
I also think the timing, I mean, it's unfortunate, but the time, because we're always talking about the contracts that are coming up, and this was the year where we didn't have any other contracts.
Because next year we'll have contracts.
Right.
Next year, we'll have a teacher contract,
Right?
if we have successful negotiations with the teachers union.
And that's the trick, timing-wise, right? And it's really never a good time. And
It-
certainly we thought perhaps this year might be, but then it's been such a sincerely bumpy ride. To say that some of this is under a dark cloud is an understatement. That this is so extraordinarily unfortunate. I, like the rest of us at this table, I know we are all truly disappointed, frustrated, angered, any number of things that we find ourselves in this situation, but we do. And our job is to move past it. I look at this and I think this does, to some degree, have something to do with the 9.1. And we do have a small opportunity here to try to move we've been talking about buying land for a long time. We've been talking about a capital reserve fund, just a small one, for a long time. And maybe that it could do it with a very minimal impact. Because certainly had we been properly advised over the past several years with how much the unreserved fund, we've been working on numbers that the unreserved fund balance is X when it was really Y. And we've been returning funds every year, thinking that this was all correct. But certainly, as we've been working, had we been properly advised, we may have come to different decisions 3 years ago, 4 years ago. We weren't given that chance, and then the voters weren't given that chance because nothing came to pass until now. But I think we need to really strongly consider if we can, I mean, just the littlest bit, just a small investment in the future, I think we'd be remiss to not at least consider.
Well, and for what it's worth, I've been recommending for the last, feels like more, but I'm sure it was at least 3 or 4 years, to recommend the board to consider the creation of a capital reserve fund for CIP items. So when I talk about roofs and septic systems and heating systems, those things all will fail. And if we had to replace the leach field at Mountain View, that's going to be a costly project. And the ability to have some money, and you could talk about $100,000 or $300,000, would allow us to be able to take care of some of those kinds of projects and still have a very healthy, significant return that will go directly for tax relief. So I think that balance is everything. I think that I don't disagree with Ginny in her concern and her trepidation around this. I share that, but I have, and the Budget Committee will remember, I've been recommending for years the creation of a capital reserve fund for facilities and capital projects. And I don't think you have to, folks are out here saying 9.1 million. The board could consider a number that is, I think, a relatively small number compared to what the surplus of money that we're talking about is. And it would still allow us to have a bit of a buffer if and when those types of projects are needed. And our CIP matrix has been approved. So anyone who wants to look at it, there's a lot of projects on there because, and remember folks, I feel very strongly, and I've stated this over and over, the school buildings, this building in particular, but all of our school buildings are the most significant investment that belong to the taxpayers of this town. And we have a responsibility to maintain those buildings, to take care of those buildings so that they will last and that generations of kids are able to use them, and that we've protected our assets because these buildings are the most, the largest assets that this community has ever invested in.
If the, even if we weren't talking about the millions of dollars, I could support if we had something that said 200,000 as a starting point for a capital reserve fund. That's a number I'll throw out for us to begin to discuss. And the fun part about this is it can go to deliberative session, and deliberative session can do what they want with that amount. And if the people who attend that think that that's a crazy number, they can bring it down. Or if they think, you know what, we want to make it more, they can move it up. And then the voters get a choice. And that's the process. But unless we come to a decision to at least put something in front of the voters that's reasonable and is not taking advantage, from what I can see, of a $9.1 million, because I still think that can handle going back. And I think we can have 200,000 left over from our budget from this year to be able to fund that.
Go ahead.
Don't you clearly think that those kinds of numbers easily could have come from revenues and not directly from taxpayers too, over the years?
The 9.1 million?
No, the 200,000 easily could have been revenues that came from grants, tuition, those kinds of things, and not from taxpayers putting money into the kitty.
Well, New Boston, I have to go back in my mind, and I'm wondering if it's possible, because it's undesignated fund balance.
Over
on-
collection, yeah,
Over
over
collection of
collection of
revenue is
revenue.
included in that amount. It's not included in particular projects that we can do, so, oh, yes.
But I'm saying
It would
it
have been.
didn't come out of,
Oh, absolutely.
taxpayers didn't put that money
New
in.
Boston
It could
sent
have easily been.
300,
New Boston had about 35 unexpected kids.
Right.
Just
and that's at 12
Yep.
apiece, that would have covered it right there. But, and that's okay. All that is the difference between an estimated revenue and actual revenue. So I don't look at that as it's the same pot of
Yeah,
of
but I'm
cash.
just saying that this is, like, people didn't actually put their money in. It came from other
Well,
sources.
it's unexpected, but there were expenditures that went with it, and it all gets part of the tax rate setting. In my mind, I don't particularly look at it as different, because it all goes in the tax rate.
Diane, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead,
I just
Steve.
want to piggyback off of Dan's point on the importance of this capital reserve fund and just getting it started. And we've been talking about it for a long time. I think we're behind where a lot of other districts are and where we should be. It's just smart planning. And so I'd be in support of the 200,000 number that Dan put out there. You know, it's really high time we got moving on this. We've talked about it a ton. I think we finally, you know, we had some kinks last year as we worked through what the wording of it would be. I think limiting it strictly to CIP projects that have been approved and go through the process, that's something that I'm definitely in support of.
I can agree to that. I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm looking for is balance. I'm looking to know that we've positioned the district, that we've looked forward, but also that most, if not all, of this situation goes back. But I do think we need to do our jobs and at least consider all the different issues before us. I think I could agree with 200.
So let me ask you a clarifying question on procedure for this evening as you see it going forward. We're gonna have public comment after this.
Yeah.
Are we looking to actually have a motion made, seconded, voted on, and then public comment, and then perhaps look at it again, or talking about what we're doing, and then come back out of public and making motions, or how do you see us proceeding?
I think it's more efficient we're probably ready to wrap up, I think, and open public comment.
Okay.
And like I said, we do have some more public this evening. So, no, I'm not looking to have motions signed, sealed, and done before we open the public comment.
Okay.
I mean, unless anybody at the table disagrees, but to me, that's the most sensible way to go forward.
I agree with, I would like to hear what the response is from our discussions.
Do we have any other additional conversation to be had right now? Good. All right. On that note, I will open the floor back up to public comment. Do I have any additional public comment before we adjourn before we wrap up? State your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Adam Osborne, and I live at 11 Blue Jay Lane. I want to begin by, as many other people have, by thanking you all for what you've done. I mean, this is an incredibly difficult situation to find yourselves in. And I know that the logical thing is to give the money back. That's probably where the greatest opportunity lies in this, in that I think the greatest challenge the school district is going to face is going to be the trust piece. And I would give Mr. Balke a ton of credit for, you did the difficult thing when you found out there was an error. When you had the forensic audit and you find, oh boy, there's a problem here. You were transparent about it. And I think that's the road the district has to go down in this instance. And the ironic thing to me is I really would rather see that money allocated to future things to offset costs. The no-brainer to me was the bond, so I was disappointed to hear that we couldn't pay down the bond, because anytime you can pay down things and save interest made sense. But having said that, I think as I've listened to folks tonight, and I have no problem with choice. I'd love to see a choice before me, because let me decide how to spend the money. But as I heard Mr. Cloutier speak about it, I began to think a little differently about it. Trust is the currency that towns and institutions deal in. And schools are the largest employer in many towns in New Hampshire. We really do. It's about trust. And you have done a beautiful job over time with my children. I'll speak for myself, with my children. My children had a fabulous experience in Goffstown. One graduated from here, one's going to graduate from another school. But great experience, very positive. I think as I heard Mr. Cloutier speak, and I would love to see a capital reserve fund established. I'm actually surprised we don't have one. I mean, it is an incredibly powerful tool for a school district. I'd say we need one of those. I would totally be supportive as a taxpayer of you putting that as a warrant article and funding it how you deem appropriate. I actually think in a district this size, $200,000 is probably not enough for a capital reserve fund. And we have major buildings. So by using a little bit of an inverse logic here, by returning the $9.1 million, you establish trust with the folks in the room. But by putting other things on the warrant article in a year where their tax rate is going to go down, the reverse logic is people might surprise you and be supportive of those very things like a capital reserve fund, or by all means try and buy the land. I would love to see us own that land. As we look to the future, to own the 100 acres behind this building would be outstanding. We've got two 50-year-old elementary school buildings. They're going to have to be addressed at some point. And in the case of Bartlett, I don't even know that you can address it on the plot that it's on. To have something where you have a long-term plan is, that to me is a good thing. But I think the key piece is what you've begun, Mr. Balke, which is to establish trust and do it in a really transparent way. You know, as we move forward, I'm like a lot of folks in this room and I think I heard a lot of good questions tonight. Your questions regarding the how and the why, that'll be resolved later. As you know, I'm sure you're going to go through the auditing processes. You know, you're going to look at how those practices were done, and I'm trusting that, I know that you're going to do a good job with that. But starting from the basis of trust, transparency, and then put some of these things to the voter, and if they do see their taxes go down, there may be a good solid chance that that capital reserve fund does come through. Maybe there is a movement to buy that land, because it does make a heck of a lot of sense for the long-term future of this town. And I think the schools are at the heart of what's been a real Goffstown resurgence. And I've been here a long, long time. This is where I've grown up. This is where I've lived as an adult. It's where I've raised my family. I'm very proud of this town, and I just want to see it continue. So, thank you. That's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Good evening, Scott Gross. Heard a lot of folks here talk about returning the 9.1, and I think really the question before the school board is how you proceed. You can proceed, I think, in two different directions. You can say, we are just simply returning the 9.1 million, and then if you want to establish a capital reserve fund or use it for a land purchase, then you will raise and appropriate money to do so. Or, conversely, you could say that we are going to fund a capital reserve fund from the 9.1 pot, much different. You're still giving the voters the opportunity, but by returning the 9.1, I think that's the long game. That's the trust factor. A lot of people here, that's very important to them, this community. If you do it the first way, yes, you're still raising and appropriating, but you can then explain to people, if you vote for this, you will see less of a refund on your taxes, but it kind of sets the stage that you're returning that 9.1, which really wasn't the district's money in the first place. So I just want to offer, there are two different routes to go. One is to return it, and then the other one is to say, okay, we're going to put this as, raise and appropriate, which is completely different, which I think might be the long game, the trust game. So just want to leave it at that. You've got choices.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Claire Roulard.
I live up on Jasmine Lane, lived in this town for 13 years, and I echo the sentiments of the folks here that you've done a really good job. I'm also one of your state reps, and I feel that it's real important. The trust is huge. You folks have heard from a few folks. You can't imagine how many folks I have heard from. I had a conversation today with Lou D'Alessandro at lunch. He is ready, willing, and able, and he will work with me to go through this legislative process. I think we can do it. I think we can get it done. I think that if you have the ability to do it, to get this accomplished for the capital fund, get the money put in it, have the voters decide, give them options, what it is that they want to do with the funds. The people are the ones that should be deciding this, the taxpayers. And I understand that we've appointed you as our board for education. This issue now is beyond education. It should go back to the taxpayer for a vote. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Romaine. I live on Clancy Drive in Goffstown. Similar to many folks you've heard tonight, I want to echo my appreciation for the diligence that you've done in presenting all of these plans. I know that a lot of us in the audience, as well as all of you as Goffstown residents, are dealing with emotion. And you have to have taken that emotion, but you've also had to sit and think about the consequences of each one of these, and also consider the unintended consequences of all of these. So I cannot tell you how much we appreciate the diligence that this amount of effort and the appreciation for putting that forward. I cannot echo anymore how much I support the Capital Reserve Fund, and if we were to ever have, and we will, have a major construction project or something, and we find ourselves having to turn to financing, again, that's money spent that we wouldn't have to spend, or extra money spent. So I support the Capital Reserve Fund. And as much as I would love $9.1 million to look at, to do things in our school for our kids, it's not right to make that decision. That the taxpayers should have had the right to make those decisions, and they should now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I'm Representative John Burt. I live at 7 Bay Street in Goffstown. My phone number is 624-5084, and that is my home number. And if I'm home, I will answer the phone. I do not have an answering machine, or unless I'm not there. I'm asking you to return the money again. I'm also asking you, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. I'm asking you not to do it legislatively. You don't have my support, because I support the taxpayers, and the taxpayers are screaming at me they want the money back. If you bring it to Concord, I will do everything I can to make sure that does not pass. Now, my first term, I sat on the municipal and county government. Now I'm on criminal justice for the past 2 terms. My first term was on municipal and county. That's where this bill would probably go. Every bill that came before me when I was there, and virtually every bill that has come before the state on this matter, or similar matters where it's just one town, dies. Because the reps up there, when I sat on the committee, and they've told me since, they don't like one town laws. They just don't. So I'm asking you, don't send it up there, because I'm gonna do whatever I can to kill that thing. Mrs. McKenna there, hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. She's absolutely right. I'm happy that she's thinking about this, because the longer you wait to return our taxpayers' money that is not yours, the more no's you are gonna get in March. Plan Penardville happened many years ago. I personally mailed everybody in this town, and I will mail them again with this information. Plan Penardville, 287 people showed up at the town hall. Selectman Adams at the time said, you know, we really don't have to listen to you taxpayers. He said that. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, he said it. Selectman Capisano said, you know what? If 287 of you show up, I'm going to listen to you. So if I mail everybody in this town, I can get enough people to show up and hopefully tell you don't do this. But as you say, you know, Madam Chair, time is running out. It is running out really fast. So just please make the motion to return the money tonight. Do the right thing. It'll save me raising the money and mailing everybody, because that's what's gonna happen, because the taxpayers are telling me they don't want you to spend that money. Go through the proper procedures and bring, you know, the warrant articles forward, but not with this 9.1 million. Bottom line, you have a bottom line budget. When I was on the budget committee for 3 years, you know, once we give you that money, you can spend it any way you want. And yes, you got payroll and other things in there. But you have money to put in that reserve if you wanted it. So I ask you again, just please do that. Return the money. Because the other thing, real quick, is the Constitution is real clear. We cannot go back. They've tried that a couple times. The bill dies every time. The Constitution, we can't go back in time. Now, when you go into public comment, I hope you mention, and I am running out of time, I apologize. But when you go into public comment, I hope you mention why you're going into public comment, because I'm going to check with the legal team up in Concord to make sure that you're going into a legal non-public.
I was going to say, I want to clarify, you're saying public comment, but what you're intending is non-public.
Non-public, I apologize, yes, non-public. Thank you for clarifying that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jill Calvo, and I'd like to speak again. I'm a Goffstown taxpayer. I'm going to repeat my closing statement for this board. This money does not belong to the school board, let alone the school district. It belongs to we, the taxpayers. It is time to show more mutual trust and respect if you people, if you want us to represent, you'd like our support moving forward. You must do the ethical right thing and return this money. I would support a capital fund in the future. If you do not return this money, you will hear me roar at every meeting you have, at every proposal you have, because you will have lost my trust and faith in this board, in this school district. Please do the right thing. You've made a gross error. You have the opportunity to correct it now.
Thank you.
Hi, Christy Garrison, 288 Tippett Hill Road, Goffstown. Thank you for allowing me to speak again. I just want to clarify, I'm a little confused. This is my second meeting I've attended. Are you going to decide what you're going to do in non-public? No. Okay. Thank you. So you'll decide it tonight while we're in public session?
We have another meeting scheduled for Monday.
Okay.
But we do have a budget committee meeting coming up tomorrow, if the weather allows, and of course, budget public hearing. But no, these decisions do not get made in non-public.
Okay.
That would not be appropriate or legal.
Okay. And then I'll just echo what John Burt said. You know, it is a bottom line budget with $9.1 million surplus. There obviously was extra money in the budget, so I would also support a $200,000 capital reserve fund for in the future, but I do not want it to come from the $9.1 million that needs to be returned to the taxpayers. So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Barb Larkin again from 32 Helen Circle. And it was really good to be here tonight and listen to the board and your comments, and it softened my opinion somewhat. And I have a question that I guess you're not going to answer, but somewhere in this meeting tonight, somebody said 85% of that $9.1 million is tax money, and the rest came from someplace else. So are we really talking about 9.1, or is the 85% going back to the taxpayers? And then that other 15%, which is what, 600,000, I don't know what the number would be, wouldn't that meet your needs for your capital gains thing? I'm a little confused at what actually of that 9 point. Because someone said something about only 85% of it came from tax money. Did I mishear that?
I didn't hear that. Did you hear that?
Did anybody in the room hear that besides me? Okay, so is that, was there something left out? Is the other 15% something they can play with and the rest of us can? No? Okay, well, sorry about that then, but thank you for listening to me, and good luck. Good luck.
Thank you. Any other further comment? Seeing none, is there any other business? All right, guys, that being said, I will entertain a motion to enter into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91A3, Roman 2, subsection D, consideration of the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property which if discussed in public would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to those of the general community.
So moved.
By Dan,
Second.
seconded by Stephen.
Yes.
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 Yes, all right, we are in non-public. Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you for your shots, and thank you for coming.
Nice.